What's going on YouTube? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Tommy Martin and this is my wife,
Phoebe Martin.
and we wanted to tell you guys a little bit about our marathon race day experience. So before we get to this video, I just want you to know that you are greatly, greatly loved and that you are wonderfully and beautifully created and that you are capable of far more than you could ever imagine. Okay guys, so I'm going to start us off and we're going to go throughout the whole race. So when we get to Presque Isle, Lake Erie, when we got to the race, it was about 5:15 in the morning and my nerves were definitely going crazy, and I was just, this was our very first marathon, so we had no idea what to expect. So there was tons of people getting there was tons of porta potties everywhere in case you needed to go to the bathroom, and I was just so excited to be running my first race ever. And so up to the beginning of the race, I really felt like I needed to go to the bathroom, but I really couldn't make myself go. I literally sat on the toilet for like 30 minutes trying to go to the bathroom, but I just couldn't go. So I was sick of it. I was like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna go with it. If I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go to the bathroom during the race, but I'm not sitting in this porta john any longer. Alright, so then I went and met up with Phoebe, my wife, and we were, getting ready for the start of the race, and we were walking to the race and we were holding hands. And at this time I just kind of reflected back on everything, all the training we'd done, training in the rain and the blistering heat, and all of those things just started flooding my mind. And then we got to the starting line, and when we got to the starting line, Phoebe gave me one last kiss, and then she took off back to her corral. And so now I was up here, and they tell you different marks. So like I was at the finish the race in 3:05 mark, which is the last one. And so that was so intimidating to begin with because I was just already really scared because it was my first marathon. But then I was with all these guys that were super fast. And then so I just kind of put my music on. I put a slow Christian song on so I wouldn't start the race off too fast. And then from there, I just started to say a quick little prayer, and as I did, the gun went off, and the race had already began. So I just slowly started making my way to the starting line. Didn't cross yet, said a short little prayer, and then it was time to go.
Okay, so the morning of the race, I was so nervous. I was like freezing cold the whole time. I was trying to force down food like a biteful of oatmeal every 10 minutes because I was really nervous. When I get nervous, I don't really want to eat. But the greatest part was my parents were both there with Tommy and Tommy and I actually didn't even say a word to each other the whole way from the hotel to the race because I think we were just so nervous. It was still early in the morning. We knew what we had to do. We knew we were properly trained, but it was something we had never done before. We had never run more than 20 miles, and that's all I kept thinking of. I can run up to 20, but what about 20 to 26? And that's just the thoughts that were going through my head. And as we walked to the starting line, I kept seeing people's tattoos of races they had done. I was running it next to Ironman. I saw Boston shirts, and all of that's really intimidating. But I remember my dad telling me the people that you want to be worried about are the people that don't look like runners at all, because when they fly by you at mile 22, you're going to say, what the heck, how did they go by me? So I just kept thinking about that. Unlike Tommy, I didn't really have problems going to the bathroom before the race. Caffeine does the trick for that. And I was able to eat probably a third of the breakfast that I wanted to eat the morning of the race. And other than that, I just tried to sit down because we got there pretty early before the race started, and I sat on top of a garbage can that my dad found, and we put a cardboard box over it. So we just tried to stay relaxed, not wear out our legs any more than we were going about to. So I walked to the starting line with Tommy hand in hand, kissed him goodbye, and went to the back, or not to the back, but to the corral that said like try to finish in 3:35. And then they played the, Then they played the national anthem, and before you knew it, the gun was going off. And so I just pressed play on my watch and pressed play on my music and walked towards the starting line, and then boom, I started going.
Alright, so then as I crossed the starting line, it was time to get in my zone. And so I definitely had a very strict plan set out to make sure I did not bonk during this race. And so my first mile had to run about an 8-minute pace. My second mile had to be at a 7:30. And so, I was just kind of jogging and feeling good about myself, listening to my Christian music. But then all of a sudden, everyone just started blowing by me, you know, and that is just, it kind of messes with your head a little bit. Because like in my mind, you know, I see these people that I don't think they should be faster than me. I'm like, you're not faster than me, you're not faster than me, why are they all passing me? But I stuck to my game plan, stayed at that 8-minute pace, and then for the second mile, 7:30, and just slowly went through it. And so those first 2 miles, I just stayed calm, collected, and tried to keep my heart rate down as low as possible, just coasting and getting warmed up a little bit.
Okay, so then we started running, and my goal that my dad had set me was for a 9-minute mile for my first mile, and which I love to warm up during running, so I just felt like every other run, you know, I was just running casually, slowly. There were people blowing by left and right, and I was like a little bit intimidated, but I knew that I had to trust the plan, so I did my first mile at 9 minutes, skipped the water stop completely. It was like a bunch of army men giving out the water. That was pretty cool. And then the second mile, I tried to run for an 8:45. So now those were my 2 goals, but of course the adrenaline was going, so I ran them about 10 seconds faster than I was supposed to already.
Then just crossing mile 2, we started going through these woods, and it was a beautiful, beautiful scenery, and I was so pumped, you know, just because I was already relaxed, and this was going to make it more relaxing. Until all of a sudden, there was this swarm of some sort of bug that was just hitting us all in the face, and it was like impossible not to get all these bugs in your mouth. And so I was just like, you know, just spitting these bugs all over the place, but I was trying to keep myself as calm and collected as possible and just stay in my zone of now 7 minutes a mile. And so I was gonna stay at this 7-minute pace until about mile probably 22. That's what my coach had told me to do. So from mile 2 till 22, I was gonna stay right at a 7-minute pace. And everything was going great. I was feeling amazing, no aches, no pains, was breathing perfectly, and I was just coasting. So at this point I had so much confidence, and I was getting to about mile 7, and when I got to mile 7, you know, they handed out free goos, and I had already about 10 goos with me, so I did not need the free ones, but of course, you know, being greedy, I was like, they're free, why not go get them? And so I was running up there just casually, you know, smiling away, and then there's this little boy, probably 5 or 6 years old, and no one was taking the goose from him because of course, you know, they'd have to bend down and grab it. I was like, I'm gonna get it from that boy because I'm just gonna make his day. And so I was running up there to him, and I reached out to get a goo from him. Well, I was also had a handheld thing that held my cell phone, and when I went to get the goo from him with that hand, he jerked his hand up to hand me the goo, and my cell phone just went flying backwards. So at this point I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I was doing so good, I'm pacing so well, and then this happens. So I run back to go get my phone, I pick up my phone, and it is completely shattered. But thank God the music was still playing, my headphones were still going, so I was still able to listen to music. I just slipped my phone back in my little handheld pouch and got back on the road. And you know, in my mind I was like, I cannot let this shake me, I cannot let this mess with me. And so I caught back up with the guy I was running with. He's like, dude, what happened? What happened to you? And I showed him my phone. He's like, dang, that sucks. I was like, yeah, it does, but if I qualify for Boston, it will be worth it. So from this point, you know, till mile 13, every water stop I was getting some water, and then about every 20 minutes I was taking a goo. And again, I was feeling great, even all the way up till mile 13.
Okay, so then after the 2-mile mark, I knew that I had to start hitting my pace. So my goal was to run 8:10s, and all of these goals were set so that we could potentially qualify for Boston. So after the 2nd-mile mark, I knew I had to be running an 8:10, so I started to run a little bit faster, and then all of a sudden, not only was I taking in more air, I started taking in all these bugs into my mouth. They were sticking to me, my face, everything. There was just, I don't know if they were mosquitoes or fleas or flies or whatever, but there was a ton of bugs everywhere. No wonder there were no fans during mile 2 to 3 because of all of these bugs. And then mile 3 came, mile 4 came, and then I started to remember I have to eat. Tommy told me that I have to eat nutrition or I'm gonna bonk. And you know, I was still nervous, so I really didn't want to, but I ripped open my first goo, and it was an espresso, delicious tasting goo, and just slurped down one of those, drank some water, and then I saw a beautiful lighthouse around mile 4. It looked very much like this one on the race shirt. So along Presque Isle there was a bunch of lighthouses, and we ran all the way around the aisle, so water was completely surrounded. So when I run, I try to focus on not really what I'm doing, but on everything that's around me. So I saw the lighthouse, I saw the beach, it reminded me back of running in Grenada. So all of these things were just running through my mind. I remembered long runs that I had done. when I was little, and just all of the dreams I had always had of running a marathon. So at this point, from mile like 3 to 7, I was just kind of in a daze. I was hitting my marks perfectly. Some of them were a little bit below 8:10, some of them were a little bit slower than 8:10, but I was able to just keep my mind completely off running, so that was very enjoyable.
So now we crossed 13.1, so I just finished a half marathon, and to be completely honest, it felt like I had only warmed up. Like I felt amazing. I felt so ready to go. And then along mile 13, I got this terrible pit in my stomach, and I knew I had to go to the bathroom really bad. And so in my mind, I knew I was already a little bit behind schedule, but I had to go to the bathroom, okay? So at this time, I picked up my pace a little bit because I saw a porta potty. And so like I was running, just, you know, run to this porta potty. I slam into the door, slam back on the toilet seat, and then all of a sudden, the porta potty itself starts to rock back a little bit. So I was like, and then in my mind, I was like, please don't fall over, please don't fall over. And then just like slammed it forward so I could continue to go to the bathroom. Went to the bathroom super fast, got out of that porta potty, and got back on the road. So it was quite the eventful 13 mile. But after that, I felt, like I said, I felt great. So I got in my zone, got in my pace, about 7-minute pace. And so I just kept going and kept that pace, got in a great group of guys, and we just kind of talked and kept that 7-minute pace all the way to mile 18.
Okay, so all of a sudden, the first half of the race was done. I passed the 13-mile mark, and the way that the race was set up, this was a 2-loop marathon. So we had to run exactly what we just we had to run exactly what we had just run all over again. And so this could be kind of a mentally tough thing for most people, but our training actually involved running a lot of loops around the same 2-mile park, so I was used to seeing the same thing over and over again and just staying mentally tough. I felt pretty good. I did have a cramp on my right side, and of course my mind was playing a few games with me, but I was just pushing through, kept focusing on hitting the 8:10s and focusing on trying to continue to put down some goo. I did find some people that were trying to run the same pace, but then I realized that they could have started before me at the starting line or behind me, and it's not a gun time race, it was a chip time race, so I couldn't really pace myself with them. I just kind of listened to my music, and I listened to country music the whole way. It was a beautiful day. But then at like mile 16, I got freezing. I was so cold. I was running in a tank top and shorts, and it was about 50 something degrees, but we had been training in 80-degree weather, and it was really shaded. So I don't know if it was because it was lack of nutrition or because it was actually that cold, but I got so cold. So I started putting down not just water, but goo electrolytes that they were giving at all the water stops, and that seemed to help.
Alright, so then we were at mile 19, and so in my head, even at the beginning of the race, I kind of had the race broken up, and to me the race didn't even start till mile 22. So here at mile 18 to 22, I said to myself, all I have to do is keep the same pace. You're feeling good, just keep going, keep talking to the people you're with, and let's go to mile 22 and then turn it on. Well, then at mile 19, my stomach decided to mess with me again, and I could not believe it. I was so mad, but then in the back of my mind, my mother-in-law's voice came into my head. She said, Tommy, if you have to go to the bathroom, just go. You can make up the time, but you'll feel so much better. And then I remember back in the car on the way to the race, my wife was like, Tommy, even in our tempo runs and all those things, when you had to make a bathroom stop, you still hit all your time, so do not worry. So listening to their advice, mile 19, I decided to make a quick bathroom stop again, went really quickly, went to the bathroom, and then was out of there. It only, cost me about 19 seconds, and I was back on the road. So then from mile 19, then after the bathroom break to 22, I just picked up the pace a little bit unintentionally, so I was running about 6:55s, and then just kind of coasted to mile 22.
Okay, so now it's about 18, 19 miles, and all of these thoughts about this wall that everyone talks about at mile 20 started to approach my mind. I had only run up to 20 miles ever in my entire life. So I was approaching a zone that I had never run in before. And so mile 19, that's all I was thinking about, was that I hope I don't hit the wall at 20. And then mile 20 came, and I started to celebrate a lot because I said, this is the furthest I have ever run, 20.1, 20.2, 20.3. So that excitement kind of lasted for about a mile and a half. And then I started to get worried. I was at 21.5 miles, and I said, oh my gosh, this is a mile and a half longer than I've ever run, and I have about 5 miles left, so I need to push. And I looked down at my watch, and I said, oh my gosh, I still felt like I was running an 8:10, but I was starting to run 8:30s and 8:40s, even though I felt like I was still running 8:10. So I kind of like pulled my leg and like, come on legs, let's go. Because my legs just started to feel like they weren't working as fast as I needed them to.
So we were approaching mile 22 and I was on mile 21 and I started seeing people fall off beside me. They were holding their hamstrings, they were holding their stomach. I was like, oh wait, they're all hitting this wall everyone's talking about. Am I gonna hit this? Am I gonna fall down? Am I gonna be like, you know, paralyzed now from here on out? Am I gonna cramp up? I was so scared, but then in my mind I said, no. Tommy, you have trained for this very moment. You've trained to this point. You've trained past your potential to make sure you would not hit this wall. You will not hit this wall, so crush it right now. And so then, you know, I was psyched, I was pumped, and coasting through mile 22, already had this mental stability, and I see mile 22, the marker, and my stomach hits me again. I said, this cannot be happening. I am going to qualify for Boston. I have to. I want to more than anything, but I knew I had to go to the bathroom one last time before I crush it on mile 22. So I see the porta potty right before mile 22. I sprint into that thing. I swear this is the fastest anyone's ever went to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom, didn't even wipe, got back on the road, crossed 22, and then my father-in-law's voice came in my head and he said, Tommy, if you hit mile 22 and you're feeling good, it is time to give it everything you've got. And so I looked down at my watch, I'm running about a 6:50. And in my mind I say, it is go time. I mean, at this point my music is already went off and I'm like, this is what it's about. Running with everything breaking, everything going wrong, it is time to crush it. And so now I start running. I start really running. And I start passing people. And this is just like increasing my momentum. I am ready to go. Past another person, more confidence. Past another person, more confidence. Another mile goes by. I look down at my clock, 6:42. I could not believe it. I keep running, go another mile, look at my watch, 6:35. You know, my mind is blown now that I'm still feeling okay. And then mile 24 and a half, 25 come, and I feel these knives going into my abdomen. Like it feels like someone's just stabbing me in the stomach. I'm like, holy cow, what in the world is this? Refocus, I regroup, and I start breathing differently. So I speed up my breathing a little bit to match my pace, and those pains went away. And then my legs, you know, they're on fire, they're burning, they're, you know, hurting a little bit. But in my mind, I tell myself, Tommy, be comfortable being uncomfortable and finish this race with everything you've got. So then at mile 25,
all right, so I know that if I want to make that 3:35, I need to pick up the pace. So from mile 22, 23, 24, 25, I'm really trying and focusing on just keeping pushing. And all of a sudden, I see this person that starts to pass me a little bit, and I recognize his shirt because he was running for the SMA Society. So I believe it's the Spinal Muscular Atrophy Society. And I had seen him running near me for like the first 6 miles, but I had lost him a while ago. And then he started to run, you know, in front of me. And I told myself, I'm gonna stick with him. I'm gonna stick right behind him and I'm run by him the whole way. So I kind of just focused on doing that, and his pace was about an 8:25. So at least I was running a few, 20 seconds faster than I was in mile 21 and 22. And that was just an incentive for me to stay with him, to keep pushing. But I knew I had to stop at a water stop and grab some water and push it in, but I just tried to keep running through every water stop because the time was slipping away. And I got to about mile 23 and I realized I'm gonna do this thing. Like, I'm gonna finish this marathon, all these long runs. Forget about never having run this distance before. I'm gonna finish this race and I'm gonna give it everything I have. I don't care if it's a qualifying for Boston. I don't care if it's best in my division, last in my division. I'm gonna finish this race with everything that I have. So I looked at my watch one last time and I said, that's it. No more looking at my watch. I'm just gonna run as fast as I can and push as hard as I can. And I knew I was about to see my parents at mile 25. So I just kept looking for their faces. And I was hoping at this point, it was like mile 23. I said, this is the 3-hour mark. Tommy's about done. Like, come on, let him break 3 hours. And I just started praying for him and focusing on him finishing the race and hoping that he had qualified for Boston. So those were the things I was focusing on, and I was just running and trucking along and no longer looking at my watch, but just pushing as hard as I could.
So at mile 25, I knew it was time to give it everything I have. So I look up and I see my in-laws, and they are screaming their heads off. And then all of a sudden, Phoebe's dad and my father-in-law says, Tommy, if you want to qualify, you gotta step on it. It's gonna hurt, but you gotta step on it. So then all of a sudden, that just filled me with adrenaline, and I just took off running as hard and as fast as I could. I was feeling good, but I knew that I had to step on it. So we round the corner. So when you're coming to the finish line, you have to round the corner, and then it's just straightaway. So I see the finish line, my eyes just lock on, completely focused, and I'm running with everything I have. Now approaching 100 meters away, 50 meters away, 25 meters away, about 15 feet away, and I look up and I see the clock, and it says 3:05:09, 3:05:10, 3:05:11, and I crossed the finish line. Everything I had worked for at this point felt like it just fell apart, because I had to make a 3:05 to qualify for Boston, and when I crossed the finish line, it said 3:05:11, and at this point, I would like to say that I was like extremely joyful for finishing, but my heart was shattered. I could not believe, after all the hard work I'd done, I did not qualify for Boston.
Okay, so this is it. I passed the 25-mile mark. I know I have 1.2 miles left, and I am just full of excitement, but man, I am in pain. My legs just felt like they were not moving. I felt cardio great, like I was still breathing normally. I wasn't extremely out of breath. I had warmed up. I had no goos left, so that meant that I had eaten all the nutrition I was supposed to, but my legs just felt it really in my hips. And so then all of a sudden I see my parents, and my dad's like, go get him, enjoy the end, like you got this. I saw Tommy's face. I couldn't tell if he had qualified or not. I didn't want to ask. I don't think I could have asked because I was pushing as hard as I could. My mom was crying. She was like, I'm so proud of you, honey. Just keep on going. So I just had that mile left, and I was going to give it everything I had. And there was probably a half a mile left, and I did end up looking at my watch, and I said, there goes 3:35. Like I realized that I didn't qualify for Boston at that point, but surprisingly I wasn't disappointed. And why is because I knew that this was my first marathon, but it definitely won't be my last. And I have so many more years of running, and I knew that my original goal when I decided to run my first marathon was to finish. I didn't even know if I could run 26.2 miles, let alone qualify for the most prestigious marathon in the country, my home state. Yeah, those thoughts went through my head, but it wasn't disappointing. I knew I had left everything on the road, and I knew that I would be back to qualify for my next race, and that's what this marathon training was about. And I just thought about the training. The race day was just the topping on the ice cream of all the hard work. It was like the marathon training was what it was all about. The journey was so much more important than the race day, and I just couldn't have been more excited to cross the finish line. And then I look behind me, and Tommy's like running, and I'm like, how the heck is he running? He just ran 26.2 miles and he's still running. He's like, babe, I'm so proud of you, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, Tommy, did you qualify for Boston? He gives me a hug, like over the line. He's like, that's okay. I was gonna tell you couldn't run Boston anyways, because you're gonna be in Africa. Like hoping to get a smile out of him. And he's like, oh. And I was like, yeah, I realized that 2 days before the race that Boston falls on Monday and you're leaving for Africa on the Saturday, so it's okay, it's okay. And he's like, yeah, I know, it's just 10 seconds, Phoebe. And I was like, yeah, but we finished our first marathon. He's like, yeah, I'm so proud of you. We finished our first marathon. Like, there's food over there, and I didn't even get any because I ran so fast back to see you finish the race, so grab me a few extra chocolate milks. And I was like, chocolate milk's my favorite. And I was just so excited, and I want to sit down, but I can't sit down. And then this guy asked me, hey, can I use your cell phone? And I was like, sure, it's full of sweat, but go for it. And he's like, I just have to text my mom, she's dying of cancer, and I just want to let her know that I'm done, I'm safe, and I ran it for her, and I gave her everything I had. And at that moment, it was just like filled with emotions again. There's people running marathons for so many different causes. There's people running for their own personal goals that they've worked so hard for. There's people running to raise money for great causes. There's people who run races to run for those who can't. And no matter what that reason is, everyone that ran this race today did it for some sort of reason.
That's kind of what woke me up, that I was so kind of disappointed because I didn't reach my personal goal, but yet there's people running this race for such greater purposes than to satisfy their own desires. And so that kind of woke me up, and then we had a whole, complete different attitude, now filled with joy and excitement that we finished our first marathon together. We were enjoying tons of food, meeting, tons of other racers. So we'd been doing that for about an hour, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of like hanging out, talking to people.
Taking pictures. Trying not to sit down, and this couple asked us like, hey, can you take our picture? We both ran the race, and we're like, oh, we did too. And so as we're taking their picture, I see my dad, and he walks over to the board that has like the official times. So a little bit of what I alluded to earlier in the video is that there's a gun time and there's a chip time. So all of our numbers have chips on it. And so the net time and the chip time was there, and my dad was like, Phoebe, he did it! 2 seconds!
So then I was over there with the family, you know, taking their pictures, just
Ty, you qualified for Boston! You qualified for Boston! And I was like, he's like, what? Yeah!
And then so like I was still taking these people's pictures, so I was holding their camera, and then Phoebe was like shaking me. I was like, yes! And these people was like, can you finish taking our picture? And then so we finished taking their picture, and then we celebrated together. So I ended up qualifying for Boston
with a 3:04:58. He had 2 seconds to spare because of that chip time. Thank God for the chips. And you know what? Like, thank God that at the end when he saw 3:05:09. Right, 3:05:09.
Yeah.
Like, thank God he didn't stop and be like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't qualify." Like, he kept running as hard as he could, and that's why he did it.
That's right. So, you know, our marathon experience was incredible. And yes, I qualified for Boston. That made it even sweeter. But even if I wouldn't have, it was still a great experience. We absolutely loved our marathon race day. And so, if you guys want to run a marathon, we would highly recommend it, right?
Yes, yes. You can definitely do it. And stay tuned for further videos where we train you and tell you exactly how you can do just that. Now listen, we are beginners who were lucky enough to have and blessed enough to have a coach who had run 1,000,000 marathons. Actually, he's about to run his 50th in January. So we're gonna give you our tips, but again, we are beginners. There's so many more experienced runners out there, but stay tuned for further videos where we show you exactly what we did for nutrition, training, and what we plan to change for our next marathon, which is in my favorite place, which is the happiest place on earth,
Disney World!
Yay!
Alright guys, so we hope you enjoyed our race day experience, and we hope you enjoy your very first marathon. So before I leave, I just want you guys to know that you are greatly, greatly loved, and that you are wonderfully and beautifully created, and that you are capable of far more than you could ever imagine.